Hello and good morning, my dear friends. So, morning coffee chats with Jill. um, I hope you guys enjoy these because I really enjoy doing them. To me, it's helpful to like kind of talk out like, who that's very booby. It's helpful to like talk out experiences that I've had, and I also believe that they are helpful to you guys as well. It's discussing the experience of life, right? Like interesting observations. And obviously, as you guys know, I like intertwining it in with my knowledge of human design because it human design offers me a language to be able to describe the experience that I am having. That's why I like human design. I mean, birth charting, like anything is similar, right? We could talk about Enneagram as well. It gives me a framework to be able to use a language to help justify, or not justify, to help explain the experience that I'm having. So I think that's why I like it so much, and to me, I just really resonate with the approach that with human design, what it is. So anyways, I wanted to describe a few more things that I've been learning that I find pretty freaking fascinating, and has really helped me understand how I show up, and yeah, kind of make some connections with why I do some of the things that I do. Because honestly, sometimes I really question why I do most of the things that I do. Sip of coffee. So, okay. Recently, I've been learning more about environment in human design. So, mine in human design is not inner vision. That's my cognition. It is nervous touch, and nervous touch is the experience of your environment. But what I'm learning about too is the whole idea that someone like me, and again, just because I have these special things in my chart doesn't mean that other people who don't have these things can't understand what I'm saying, right? Like it's just giving me a language to describe things. But it's like, just because I have this in my chart doesn't mean that you can't possibly experience the same thing that I'm experiencing. I'm just like giving my experience a language. So don't think that just because you don't have nervous touch doesn't mean that you can't relate to what I'm saying or whatever. Anyway, so I don't know why I keep justifying myself. um, so the really interesting thing that I've been learning about this lately is the whole idea of adjusting frequencies. So I am really so I'm also internal markets in human design. So like the orientation in space, all that type of stuff really impacts me, and I've noticed that over the years. But it's also like, so I won't manipulate a space necessarily. Like if I'm in a space, I'm not going to go and move the furniture around, or like change my orientation to it in it. I am going to change how I feel about my orientation of being in that particular part of the space. So it's like I am really selective and really picky about like my vantage point of like where, for example, like where I'm sitting at a dinner table. But if you had me like sit there and be like, okay, like what's it like to sit here, and then I'd want to change, and then maybe later on, if I was left to my devices and just completely uninhibited with this, is what I'm saying. I don't do this. But if it would be like, okay, I want to sit here because I want to experience what it's like to sit here, like with the lighting coming in and the orientation of like the furniture and space next to me and like who's sitting next to me. But then what would it be like if I moved over there? It's like I want to pick the frequencies, I want to pick the sensation and change it. It's not like one's better than the other. It's more just like that curiosity thing of having that experience of what is that like. And so with that, what I've been finding really interesting about learning more about this nervous touch aspect is just how sensitive I am. It's like it allows me to open up to feel more comfortable with the acknowledgement that I am really sensitive to everything, and it makes sense to me why I spend so much time alone. Because it's even, I ingest frequencies. And if I'm around someone who doesn't have a good frequency, sometimes I don't exactly know right at that moment in time. I can tell you that something's not right, the splenic authority, right? I could say, this doesn't feel right, but I can't tell you why. I don't know. And it's not until after the fact where I've processed it, where it's like that tonal energy that I have experienced has like processed through my body, and I can like get it out and like think about it a bit more, which inner vision, like kind of visualize after the fact, like something that I would have experienced, then I can start to understand like where that might have come from. How long that takes, it depends really on like my understanding of things, or just how much I'm allowing myself to be cognizant of my experience. Because I do find, if you are like along the lines, if you can relate to this, where it's like, this is like a HSP empath type vibe to it as well, just being a highly sensitive individual, that it's easier to numb, a lot easier to numb, because there's just so much going on constantly, and it's difficult too, especially because you're trying to sense the perception of somebody else too, right? And it depends on, like, obviously a one-on-one interaction is a lot more overwhelming to me than being in a group setting where there's buzzing coming from everywhere, but I'm not having to like pick up on the frequency of one individual person, because picking up on the frequency of one individual person is a lot. It's so much. And sometimes it's great, but it's also like, depending on the person, it's almost like kryptonite, right? Where I'm like a moth to a flame, where it's like I'm being like indulged in like just picking up and like basking in like inhaling this frequency, and it's great, like it feels great, but then I also am aware that I'm going to go through serious, almost like withdrawal phase after the fact with it, which is sometimes it's just so painful that it's like you almost don't want to get that involved with someone, because you're aware of the aftermath of like what you're going to have to go through afterwards. And I think that there's something to be said about that, of HSPs, empaths feeling in general, which I think, in this modern era that we live in, it's like, I don't know, I think people could really educate themselves more on the experience of emotions, and acknowledge that there aren't necessarily good or bad emotions per se. It's you need to feel all of them, and you can't really experience the highs without the lows, in a sense. So I've just come to an understanding in my life that I feel and experience things on such like a detailed, like visceral level constantly, that I just need to be comfortable with also knowing that when I experience like these happy moments, and like this complete, like, yeah, I can't even describe it, just like happiness, that I also need to understand that I need to be okay with experiencing pain, because you have to, right? You can't have all happiness and then not know what the other side feels like. And that's what I'm talking about, like when you're in an experience with someone, or having an experience, you had a great time, let's say you went to a concert, right? Like that exhilaration, that amazing feeling, but then the concert will end, right? It will end. And what do you do then? Right? You have to learn how to feel the pain of the loss, that you're no longer in that moment, but like doing it in a way that helps you just process and continue to move on and not get stuck. And that's where I can see a lot of people getting stuck in the past with things, because it's easier to get stuck and kind of ruminate on things than it is to process through. Well, it seems easier. It's not, in my opinion. It seems easier to get stuck in the past and ruminate on the good times in the past, and then kind of like, as opposed to processing and moving forward. And I can also see how that generates the fear of continuing to want to feel things, right? Like, we've all experienced loss in some capacity. I think like relationship loss is probably one that we can all understand what that is. And it's painful every single time, but that doesn't mean that you stop pursuing, or that you stop that you stop having the experience of love, right? But I feel like so many people block themselves from giving themselves the ability to experience happiness or love, whatever descriptor word you want to call it, because it's an avoidance of the thing that comes from the aftermath of having this beautiful experience, right? That's tough. I'm not saying I'm not perfect at it. I think that's just been my experience as of late, of just understanding that, the more I learn about things in my human design, and the more I learn about, processing emotions, learning how to have emotions and not numb them all the time, which, like I said, I'm working on that. It's sometimes easier just to numb them. Yeah, it's how do you experience the highs and the lows and still walk through life, right? I don't think there's a perfect way, and I don't think there's just one way. I think there's many different ways, and one of the things that I was learning about too was about processing these things. So movement or stillness, it kind of depends. So in someone like me who has like a nervous touch type of vibe, it's my orientation to the frequencies that is going to shift how my perception of how I'm feeling, or like my experience of reality at that moment in time. And so what I mean by that is that, depending on the processing that I'm going through, maybe I'll want to sit in stillness, or maybe I'll want to go for a walk, or maybe I'll want to go to the gym. I don't know if that's not something I do very often, but something like maybe I want to work out. It just depends. So don't ever think that you need to have like these specific rituals that, people always describe as stress management, because they're constantly going to change for you depending on what you need at that moment in time. Maybe what's therapeutic for you is to actually go out into a buzzing atmosphere and like just be around a bunch of people. Maybe you just need to be in complete silence. Like there's no one size fits all, but there's also no one size fits every scenario. It's constantly going to change. So I hope that is helpful for you guys, because that's a concept for me to kind of just understand of like, why do I do some of the things that I do? Because sometimes I don't completely understand it. It makes me feel like I'm a little like bouncy all over the place, not consistent. And I'm not consistent at all, which again is back in, I can justify that with things that I learned in my human design chart. Regardless of that, you don't have to be consistent to process emotions, but you also need to learn how to process emotions, and just understands that the experience of life is painful most of the time. But does that necessarily have to be a bad thing? Like, how can you shift your perception of that experience, of that like low, of that pain, in a way that is more constructive, I suppose. And I'll leave on this before I start rambling too much. I heard someone say something, Melanie Ann Lair, I enjoy listening to her. She had said something about the whole idea that a heart doesn't break, it tears. And what does muscle do when it tears? You make it stronger, right? That to me just kind of like shifted the whole idea of, it's actually very powerful to be able to have the ability to experience pain and not avoid it. And I mean, emotional pain. But yeah, it makes you stronger. It makes you have the ability to be able to feel things more deeply and to feel things with integrity. And, I really do believe that highly sensitive people, empaths, people that can relate to what I'm saying right now, you're here for a reason, right? And I just think too many people in this world are so fine with conflict avoidance. And what I like in reference to avoiding pain, avoiding feeling things that don't feel good. But you know what? You kind of have to. And the more that people can become comfortable with feeling things that don't feel good, I think the better off everybody will be. But you're here to teach people that, right? Which is, it's a gift. But it's also, it feels like a burden sometimes, because it is just so much. Anyways, let's end the conversation at there. But yeah, that was something I've been learning about lately, that's been really interesting to me, of like how to absorb this concept and put it and work with it in my day-to-day life. So I hope that helps you guys on some level, as it helps me to talk it out. So thank you guys. I'll talk to you later.